In this video, I'm going to show some examples of subtracting integers. Before we jump into the examples, let's look at some basic problems like 5 minus 2. Now we know the answer to this is 3, but I want to show you that addition and subtraction really are just inverse operations, which means they are the opposite of each other. If we change this operation from subtraction to addition, we must then add the additive inverse of 2. So the number our first addend is 5. That's the number we're doing the operation to. If we change the operation, we need to add the additive inverse, negative 2. And when we combine 5 positives with 2 negatives, we cancel out some of the positives, and we end up with 3. And this idea of changing the operation and then using the additive inverse of a number will work every single time. So if we take something like 6 minus 1, the additive inverse of 1 is negative 1. So 6 plus negative 1 is positive 5, which of course is the answer. So we can always think of subtraction as adding the opposite. And I highly encourage you to think of subtraction of integers that way, adding the opposite. Do not go through and try to memorize what you do in each of these 4 types of subtraction problems. If you end up trying to do that, you're going to end up getting yourself confused. If you think of it as adding the opposite, which is what subtraction really is, it will work in every situation that you apply that to. So on question 1, we have negative 3 minus negative 4. And by the way, you may have noticed that sometimes we put parentheses around integers. We only do that when we have an operation and a sign right next to each other. This is an operation, this is a sign. This does not mean minus 4, this means negative 4. It means this 4 is located to the left of the 0 on the number line. This means I'm doing something to this number right here. It's an operation that I'm doing to it. So in this problem, I am doing negative 3 minus negative 4, which means I'm going to add the opposite of negative 4. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. And now I'm just to an adding integers problem. So I'm combining negative 3 with positive 4. I have more positives, so I'm going to cancel out some of those positives, and I'm left with 1 positive after cancellation. Question 2, we have 87 minus negative 82. And again, we have parentheses because we have an operation and a sign directly next to each other. It's meant to eliminate confusion. So we're going to take our 87 and we're going to add the opposite of negative 82. The opposite of negative 82 is positive 82. So this is just a regular addition problem. 87 and 82 is 169. Question 3. Negative 37 minus 51. We don't have parentheses because the 51 is actually a positive number, and we know it's a positive number because it doesn't have a sign in front of it. So I'm going to take the number that I'm doing the operation to, negative 37, and I'm going to instead of subtracting, I'm going to add the opposite of 51. The opposite of 51 is negative 51, putting parentheses because I have an operation and a sign next to each other. Now I'm just combining 2 negative numbers. So 37 negatives and 51 negatives gives me 88 negatives? 88 negatives, negative 88. And our last example, subtract 6 minus 9. Now it might be very tempting for you to think of this as 3. Remember that subtraction is not commutative. The order matters. 9 minus 6 is 3, but 6 minus 9 is not 3. So again, 6 minus 9, I'm going to take my original number, 6, and I'm going to change this from a subtraction problem to an addition problem, but I need to add the opposite. The opposite of 9 is negative 9. So I'm combining 6 positive counters with 9 negative counters. The 9 negative counters is what I have the most of. So the 6 positive counters are going to cancel some of those out, and I'll be left with 3 negative counters. 6 minus 9 is negative 3. Because this is often a difficult objective for students to master, I'm going to show some more examples just so hopefully you kind of get the idea of what we're doing here. Remember that subtraction is the same thing as adding the opposite. So in every one of these examples, I can think of it as an addition problem. In number 1 here, I have 36 minus negative 18. I'm going to add the opposite, which means I'm going to add 36 plus the opposite of negative 18 is positive 18. 36 plus 18, just do it out to the side if you don't know it in your head, is 54. 42 minus 93, change it to an addition problem. The opposite of 93 is negative 93, and I know that 93 was a positive number. If it was a negative number, it would have had a negative sign in front of it. Instead, what it had in front of it was an operation. So I have more negatives than positives, so I'm going to cancel out some of those negatives with the positives. So 93 canceling out 42 leaves me with 51, and they will be negatives because I had more negatives to begin with. Question 3, negative 12 minus negative 7. Change it to an addition problem and add the opposite. The opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. I have more negatives than positives, so some of the negatives will be canceled out, but not all of them. And it looks like I'll have 5 negatives left over. And lastly, negative 52 minus 13. Change it to an addition problem. Add the opposite of 13, which is negative 13. And I'm just combining a whole bunch of negatives, 52 negatives and 13 more negatives, which leaves me with 65 negatives.